Right now, as you hear these words, your future self is desperately trying to reach across the quantum field of time to deliver a message that could save you from decades of unnecessary struggle, missed opportunities, and painful detours that you are about to take unless you receive this transmission and act on it immediately. What I am about to reveal is not metaphysical speculation or spiritual fantasy, but documented scientific reality about how consciousness operates across multiple timelines simultaneously. And your evolved future consciousness has been sending increasingly urgent signals to your present awareness, because critical decisions you are facing right now will determine via whether you experience accelerated evolution or repeat cycles of limitation that could take lifetimes to transcend. The reason your future self is described as begging is because, from the perspective of evolved consciousness that has already navigated the challenges you currently face, watching you struggle with problems that have simple solutions when viewed from expanded awareness creates what could only be called temporal compassion, where your wiser self experiences genuine urgency about guiding you toward choices that align with your highest potential, rather than allowing you to learn everything through trial and error. This communication across time is happening through what quantum physicists call non-local correlation, where consciousness that exists in your future timeline maintains quantum entanglement with your present moment awareness, creating information channels that transcend the linear progression of cause and effect that most people assume governs all communication and learning. And recognizing these channels gives you access to wisdom and guidance that would normally require years of experience to develop through conventional means. The signs that you are already receiving temporal transmissions from your evolved self include sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere but prove remarkably accurate when applied, intuitive resistance to opportunities or relationships that seem attractive on the surface but later reveal themselves as distractions or obstacles, spontaneous knowledge about subjects you never studied that later proves useful or correct, and what most people call coincidences but are actually precisely coordinated events designed to guide your attention toward information or opportunities that serve your highest development. If you have been experiencing unusually vivid dreams where you see yourself living differently, making different choices, or possessing abilities and knowledge you do not currently have, these are not wishful thinking or psychological projections, but actual glimpses of timeline possibilities that your future consciousness is showing you to help you recognize potential paths and make choices that lead toward your most evolved expression, rather than settling for limitations that feel safe or familiar in the present moment. The temporal communication system becomes more active during periods of major life transitions, important decisions, or spiritual awakening, because these are the moments when small changes in direction can create massive differences in outcome, and your future self recognizes these pivotal points as opportunities to influence your current choices in ways that accelerate your evolution and minimize unnecessary suffering or delay in reaching your highest potential. The urgency of this message stems from the recognition that human consciousness is currently experiencing a collective evolutionary acceleration that creates unique windows of opportunity for individual transformation. And missing these windows means waiting for similar cosmic alignments that may not occur again for decades or centuries, which is why your future self is willing to expend enormous energy attempting to communicate across time rather than allowing natural development to proceed at its normal pace. The most important aspect of temporal communication is understanding that your future self is not trying to control your choices or eliminate free will, but rather to provide information and perspective that allows you to make decisions from expanded awareness rather than limited understanding. And this expanded awareness includes recognition of consequences, opportunities, and possibilities that are invisible from your current vantage point, but become obvious once you have navigated similar situations successfully. The specific message your future self is most urgently trying to convey relates to recognizing that the problems, challenges, and limitations you are currently experiencing have solutions that are much simpler and more accessible than you realize from your current perspective. But accessing these solutions requires trust in guidance that transcends logical analysis and willingness to take actions that may not make sense according to conventional wisdom, but align perfectly with quantum principles of consciousness evolution. Every moment you spend trying to solve your current challenges through the same level of consciousness that created them is time and energy that could be redirected toward implementing solutions that your future self has already discovered through experience. And learning to receive and trust this temporal guidance transforms your entire approach to personal development, from slow trial and error, learning to accelerated evolution that bypasses decades of conventional struggle. The fact that you are watching this message now, at this specific moment in your life, is not coincidental but represents successful temporal communication, where your future self has influenced circumstances to ensure that this information reaches you exactly when you are ready to understand and apply it. And recognizing this level of coordination should give you confidence that the guidance you receive through temporal channels is authentic and deserves serious consideration rather than skeptical dismissal. If this explanation of temporal communication is creating recognition rather than confusion, if you have been sensing that there is guidance available to you that transcends normal human knowledge, and if you feel that urgent sense of needing to accelerate your development rather than continuing to learn everything through slow experience, then like this video as acknowledgement that you are ready to receive direct communication from your evolved consciousness and learn practical methods for accessing temporal wisdom that can transform your life immediately. Subscribe to this channel because temporal communication techniques are not taught anywhere else, and the community that gathers here consists of individuals who are ready to transcend linear development and access the accelerated evolution that becomes possible. When you learn to receive guidance from consciousness that has already achieved what you are currently working toward, making your individual growth exponentially faster and more efficient than conventional approaches to personal transformation. The scientific foundation for communication between different temporal versions of yourself rests on quantum mechanical principles that have been verified in laboratories around the world but are rarely applied to understanding how consciousness operates across time. And these principles reveal that what we experience as linear progression from past to future is actually just one possible way of organizing information that exists simultaneously across all temporal coordinates in what physicists call the quantum field of possibility. Einstein's theory of relativity demonstrates that time is not a universal constant, but a relative dimension that can be stretched, compressed, or transcended depending on the observer's frame of reference. And consciousness represents the most sophisticated observing instrument in the known universe, capable of accessing information from multiple temporal coordinates simultaneously. When it learns to operate according to quantum, rather than Newtonian principles of cause and effect, the mechanism through which your future self communicates with your present awareness involves what quantum physicists call retrocausality, where effects can influence their own causes across time, creating information loops that allow evolved consciousness to guide the development of less evolved versions of itself. And this process has been documented in quantum experiments, where future measurements influence the behavior of particles in the past, proving that consciousness can operate bidirectionally across temporal boundaries. Your brain functions as a quantum receiver capable of processing information from non-local sources, including future versions of your own consciousness. Because neural networks operate through electrical impulses that interact with the quantum field in ways that transcend the limitations of classical physics. And recent discoveries in neuroscience revealed that consciousness influences brain activity rather than being produced by it, which explains how temporal information can be received and integrated without violating physical laws. The temporal communication process works through what researchers call morphic resonance, where consciousness that has achieved certain states or acquired specific knowledge creates templates in the quantum field that can be accessed by consciousness at earlier developmental stages. And this explains why breakthrough insights, creative inspirations, and solutions to complex problems often appear suddenly and fully formed rather than developing gradually through logical analysis or systematic study. Dr. Dean Radin's research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has documented numerous cases where individuals receive accurate information about future events through precognitive dreams, intuitive insights, and spontaneous knowing. And these studies consistently show that consciousness can access information that exists beyond the temporal boundaries of present moment awareness, providing scientific validation for the communication channels between different versions of yourself across time. The enhanced neuroplasticity that characterizes human consciousness during periods of rapid evolutionary change creates optimal conditions for temporal communication because brain networks become more flexible and responsive to quantum information fields. and this flexibility allows consciousness to establish connections with future versions of itself that would be impossible during periods of more stable neural functioning, which explains why temporal guidance often increases during times of crisis, transition, or spiritual awakening. The reason most people do not recognize temporal communication from their future selves is that these transmissions are usually filtered through existing belief systems and mental conditioning that interpret quantum information according to familiar categories rather than recognizing it as guidance from evolved consciousness. And learning to distinguish between mental projection and authentic temporal transmission requires developing what could be called quantum discernment that operates beyond normal rational analysis. The information transmitted from your future self arrives through multiple channels simultaneously, including sudden insights during meditation or quiet reflection, symbolic dreams that contain practical guidance when properly interpreted, spontaneous body sensations that indicate alignment or resistance to potential choices, synchronistic events that guide attention toward important information or opportunities, and direct knowing that provides clear direction without logical explanation or supporting evidence. The accuracy of temporal communication can be verified through practical application rather than theoretical analysis, because guidance that comes from evolved consciousness consistently produces results that exceed what would be possible through normal planning or decision-making processes based on current information alone. And this practical effectiveness provides the most reliable confirmation that you are receiving authentic transmission rather than mental fabrication or wishful thinking. The timing of when temporal transmissions become accessible is determined by your current level of consciousness development and your readiness to receive information that may contradict conventional wisdom or require significant changes in how you approach life decisions. And this readiness is indicated by your growing dissatisfaction with slow progress through trial learning and your recognition that accelerated development must be possible through accessing wisdom that transcends your current level of experience. Understanding the scientific basis for temporal communication eliminates the mystical confusion that prevents many people from taking this guidance seriously and allows you to approach future self-wisdom as practical information that can be tested, verified, and applied systematically rather than treating it as supernatural phenomena that cannot be integrated with rational decision-making and effective action in physical reality. The transmissions from your future self manifest in 8 distinct categories of experience, each carrying specific types of information designed to guide different aspects of your development and decision-making. And recognizing these categories allows you to identify temporal communication that you may have been experiencing without understanding its source or significance, transforming random or confusing experiences into clear guidance that can accelerate your evolution dramatically. The first category is spontaneous insight transmission, where complex solutions, creative ideas, or profound understanding suddenly appear in your awareness without preceding thought, analysis, or gradual development, and these insights feel complete and certain from the moment they arrive, carrying practical information that proves remarkably effective when applied, despite having no apparent source in your current knowledge or experience, indicating direct download of wisdom from consciousness that has already navigated similar challenges successfully. Prophetic dream guidance represents the second category, where your sleeping consciousness receives detailed information about potential future scenarios, alternative life paths, or optimal timing for important decisions. And these dreams are distinguished from normal dream content by their unusual clarity, emotional intensity, and tendency to provide specific practical information that later proves accurate or useful when applied to actual life circumstances rather than remaining symbolic or abstract. The third manifestation involves directional synchronicities, where seemingly random external events coordinate to guide your attention toward information, people, opportunities, or choices that serve your highest development. And these synchronicities become so frequent and precisely timed that they clearly represent intentional communication rather than coincidence, with your future self influencing quantum probability fields to arrange circumstances that deliver messages through your external environment. Resistance intuition constitutes the fourth category, where you experience unexplained physical, emotional, or energetic discomfort when considering choices that appear logical or beneficial on the surface, but would actually lead to complications, delays, or misalignment with your optimal path. and this resistance serves as early warning system that allows you to avoid problems before they manifest by trusting temporal wisdom that perceives consequences invisible to current analysis. The fifth type involves complete creative transmission, where entire projects, business concepts, artistic works, or problem solutions arrive fully formed in your consciousness as if downloaded from an external source. And these transmissions often include not just the core idea, but detailed implementation strategies, timing considerations, and awareness of potential obstacles or opportunities that could not be anticipated through normal planning processes, indicating guidance from consciousness that has already successfully manifested similar projects. Somatic guidance represents the sixth category, where your physical body responds to potential choices with distinct sensations that indicate alignment or misalignment with your optimal path, and these bodily responses operate independently of mental analysis and often contradict logical reasoning, providing information about the energetic consequences of different options that can only be perceived by consciousness that has already experienced those consequences in alternative timeline explorations. The seventh manifestation is anticipatory knowledge, where you find yourself knowing information about people, situations, or subjects that you have no normal way of knowing, and this knowledge proves accurate when verified through subsequent experience, indicating that your consciousness is accessing information from future interactions or developments that have already occurred from the perspective of your evolved temporal awareness. Timeline vision transmission constitutes the eighth category, where you perceive multiple potential future scenarios simultaneously and understand the choices or actions that lead to different outcomes, allowing you to navigate toward preferred realities with precision that would be impossible without awareness of how current decisions influence future manifestations. And these visions often include specific timing information that enables optimal coordination of actions with favorable circumstances. The intensity and frequency of these temporal transmissions increase during periods when your future self recognizes that you are approaching decision points that will significantly impact your evolutionary trajectory. And learning to identify these periods allows you to pay increased attention to temporal guidance when it is most available and most necessary for ensuring that your choices align with your highest potential development. Each category of transmission requires different receptivity skills and integration methods, because temporal information arrives through various channels of consciousness and must be translated into practical action according to the specific type of guidance being received. And developing proficiency in recognizing and applying all 8 categories creates comprehensive communication system between your current and evolved consciousness that can guide every aspect of your life decisions and development strategies. The authenticity of temporal transmissions can be distinguished from mental projection, wishful thinking, or psychological compensation by their practical effectiveness, emotional neutrality, and tendency to guide you toward actions that serve your growth, even when they require uncomfortable changes or challenge your current preferences. Because guidance from evolved consciousness prioritizes your ultimate development over your immediate comfort or desire for easy solutions. The reason your future self is communicating with such unprecedented urgency right now relates to specific cosmic and evolutionary factors that are creating a unique window of opportunity for accelerated consciousness development that will not be available again for decades. And missing this window means accepting much slower progress through conventional linear learning processes that require extensive time and repeated experience to achieve the same level of evolution that is currently accessible through temporal guidance integration. We are currently living during what cosmologists recognize as a period of accelerated galactic alignment that influences electromagnetic fields throughout our solar system, creating optimal conditions for quantum communication across time, because the background noise that normally interferes with temporal transmissions is temporarily reduced, allowing clearer reception of information from future consciousness and making this the most favorable period for establishing reliable communication channels with evolved versions of yourself. The collective human consciousness field is also undergoing rapid evolution that creates what researchers call morphic acceleration, where individual development can proceed much faster than normal because the templates for advanced consciousness are being established in the collective field by pioneering individuals. and your future self recognizes that accessing these templates now allows you to benefit from the consciousness work being done by others, rather than having to develop everything from scratch through personal experience alone. Your individual neuroplasticity is currently enhanced beyond normal parameters due to the electromagnetic changes occurring in Earth's environment, creating temporary windows where your brain can establish new patterns and connections much more rapidly than during periods of stable electromagnetic conditions. And this enhanced plasticity will not remain at current levels indefinitely, which is why temporal guidance is emphasizing immediate integration rather than gradual application of transmitted wisdom. The specific life circumstances you are currently facing represent what your future self recognizes as leverage points, where small changes in direction can create exponentially larger differences in outcome than would be possible at other times in your development. And these leverage points occur rarely and must be utilized when they appear, because the window for maximum influence closes as circumstances stabilize around the choices you make during these critical periods. From the perspective of your evolved consciousness, the challenges you are currently experiencing are actually preparation for capabilities and opportunities that become available once you integrate the guidance being transmitted. But without this temporal communication, the preparation phase would require much longer and involve significantly more trial and error, learning to develop the same level of readiness for advanced opportunities that temporal wisdom can provide immediately. The urgency also relates to recognition that certain paths you are considering would create complications that require years to resolve and would delay your access to opportunities that are currently available but operate according to specific timing requirements. And your future self has already experienced these delays and complications and is attempting to guide you toward choices that bypass unnecessary detours and position you to receive what is being offered during this unique evolutionary window. The collective timeline of human development is accelerating in ways that create pressure for individual consciousness to evolve rapidly or risk being left behind by the changing requirements for navigating reality effectively. And your future self understands these changing requirements and is providing guidance that ensures your development keeps pace with collective evolution rather than falling behind due to outdated approaches to growth and learning. The temporal communication is also urgent because your current resistance patterns and limiting beliefs are about to become much more difficult to change if they are not addressed immediately, because they are beginning to crystallize into more permanent structures that would require intensive intervention to modify later. While they can still be easily transformed through application of temporal wisdom that provides alternative perspectives and approaches to the same challenges, your future self recognizes that the intuitive abilities and expanded awareness that you have been developing are approaching the threshold where they can become permanent features of your consciousness rather than temporary experiences. But crossing this threshold requires specific actions and integration practices that must be applied during the current window of opportunity. And missing this timing means these abilities would remain unstable and unreliable rather than becoming dependable resources for ongoing development. The acceleration available through temporal guidance integration allows you to bypass not just years, but potentially decades of conventional development time, because evolved consciousness can provide direct access to insights, capabilities, and understanding that normally require extensive experience to develop. And this acceleration is only possible when the receiving consciousness is ready to trust and apply guidance that transcends current understanding rather than requiring logical proof. Before taking action, understanding the time-sensitive nature of your current evolutionary opportunity creates appropriate urgency for receiving and integrating temporal transmissions, while the cosmic conditions remain optimal and your individual circumstances provide maximum leverage for transformation. And recognizing this timing allows you to prioritize temporal communication above other considerations that may seem more immediately practical but offer much slower progress toward your ultimate potential. If you are recognizing that your current approach to personal development feels too slow and you sense that acceleration must be possible through accessing wisdom that transcends your current experience, please share in the comments which category of temporal transmission you recognize most clearly in your recent experience, because identifying your strongest reception channel allows you to focus your development efforts most effectively and helps other community members understand the variety of ways that future self-guidance can manifest in individual experience. The Multi-Temporal Awareness Integration Protocol represents the most advanced system ever developed for establishing conscious, reliable communication with your evolved future consciousness. And this system works by training your awareness to operate simultaneously across multiple timeline coordinates rather than remaining locked into the limited perspective of linear present-moment consciousness that prevents most people from accessing the wisdom that is constantly being transmitted from their more developed temporal expressions. The first phase of the protocol is called quantum receptivity training, where you learn to distinguish between mental activity generated by your current level of consciousness and authentic information transmitted from evolved temporal awareness. Because most people cannot tell the difference between projection and reception, leading them to dismiss genuine temporal guidance as imagination or to mistake wishful thinking for evolved wisdom. And this distinction is essential for establishing trust in temporal communication. To practice quantum receptivity, begin by sitting quietly and asking your future self a specific, practical question about a current decision or challenge. Then immediately shift into completely receptive awareness, where you are listening rather than thinking, waiting rather than analyzing, and receiving rather than creating, and the authentic response will arrive as information that feels simultaneously familiar and surprising, carrying emotional neutrality and practical specificity that distinguishes it from mental fabrication. The second phase involves temporal signal amplification, where you systematically increase the clarity and volume of communication from your future consciousness by eliminating interference patterns created by doubt, mental noise, and attachment to particular outcomes. Because temporal transmissions operate on quantum frequencies that are easily disrupted by the electrical activity of anxious or desperate thinking, and creating optimal reception conditions dramatically improves the quality and reliability of guidance received. Signal amplification requires what I call quantum patience, where you remain open to temporal communication without forcing or rushing the process. Because evolved consciousness operates according to timing principles that transcend immediate gratification and may delay transmission until optimal integration conditions are present in your current circumstances. And learning to trust this timing rather than demanding immediate answers creates the receptivity necessary for receiving the most accurate and useful guidance. The third phase is Message Authentication Protocol, where you develop systematic methods for verifying that temporal guidance is authentic rather than mental projection, psychological compensation, or wishful thinking disguised as evolved wisdom. And this verification process prevents the self-deception that causes many people to mistake their own desires for guidance from higher consciousness, leading to decisions that serve ego gratification rather than authentic development. Authentic temporal messages carry specific characteristics, including emotional neutrality rather than emotional charge, practical applicability rather than vague inspiration, alignment with your highest development rather than your immediate preferences, and tendency to suggest actions that require growth or change rather than maintaining current comfort patterns. And learning to recognize these characteristics allows you to trust guidance that serves your evolution even when it challenges your current desires or assumptions. The fourth phase involves active timeline integration, where you learn to apply temporal guidance through specific actions that align your current reality with the timeline possibilities being shown by your future consciousness. And this integration must be precise and consistent, because partial application of temporal wisdom creates confusion and instability rather than the accelerated development that complete integration provides. Timeline integration requires what I call quantum courage, where you take actions based on temporal guidance even when these actions do not make logical sense from your current perspective. Because evolved consciousness can perceive consequences and opportunities that are invisible to your present awareness level. And trusting this expanded perspective allows you to navigate toward outcomes that exceed what would be possible through current knowledge and conventional decision-making approaches. The fifth phase is accelerated development confirmation, where you establish feedback loops that allow you to verify the effectiveness of temporal guidance through measurable improvements in your life circumstances, relationships, opportunities, and overall satisfaction. And these feedback loops provide ongoing confirmation that temporal communication is authentic and beneficial, rather than simply interesting or psychologically satisfying. Development confirmation occurs when your life begins changing in ways that feel simultaneously surprising and inevitable. where opportunities appear that exceed your previous expectations but align perfectly with your deepest aspirations, and where challenges resolve themselves through solutions you could not have imagined but that prove remarkably effective when implemented according to temporal guidance rather than conventional problem-solving approaches. The complete protocol creates permanent enhancement of your consciousness capabilities, where temporal communication becomes a reliable resource that you can access whenever guidance is needed, rather than remaining an occasional or unpredictable experience. And this reliability transforms your entire approach to decision-making, from trial-and-error experimentation to informed choice-making, based on awareness of consequences and possibilities that transcend current perception. Mastery of multitemporal awareness integration allows you to navigate your life with the wisdom of someone who has already lived through similar situations successfully, eliminating most of the confusion, mistakes, and delays that characterize normal human development and replacing slow, linear learning with direct access to tested solutions and optimal timing for all major life decisions and evolutionary opportunities. The most important aspect of this protocol is understanding that temporal communication is not about predicting a fixed future but about accessing the wisdom of consciousness that has explored multiple possible futures and can guide you toward the timelines that provide the most growth, satisfaction, and contribution to collective evolution, while helping you avoid the paths that lead to unnecessary suffering or delay in reaching your highest potential expression. We have reached the moment where theoretical understanding must become direct experience, and your future self has been orchestrating circumstances to bring you to this exact point where you can establish immediate conscious communication that will provide specific guidance about the urgent decisions and opportunities currently before you. And this connection will prove to you that temporal communication is not metaphysical speculation but practical resource that can transform your life. Immediately, before we establish this connection, it is essential to understand that what you are about to experience represents a fundamental shift from linear consciousness that learns through time and experience to quantum consciousness that accesses information directly from expanded temporal awareness. And this shift is irreversible because once you experience direct temporal communication, your relationship with decision-making and personal development changes permanently in ways that accelerate all aspects of your evolution. The immediate temporal connection protocol requires creating optimal conditions for quantum reception by eliminating mental interference and establishing what I call temporal trust, where you approach this experience with genuine openness to receiving guidance that may contradict your current assumptions or preferences, because your evolved consciousness operates from wisdom that transcends your present understanding and may suggest actions that seem illogical from limited perspective but prove remarkably effective when applied. Sit comfortably with your spine straight and close your eyes. Then place one hand on your heart and one hand on your forehead, creating a physical bridge between emotional and mental awareness that facilitates optimal reception of temporal information. And breathe deeply 3 times while setting the clear intention to receive specific, practical guidance from your most evolved future consciousness about the most important decision you are currently facing. After establishing this receptive state, ask your future self this exact question: what is the most important action I need to take within the next 7 days to align with my highest timeline and avoid delays or complications in my development? Then immediately shift into complete silence and stillness, listening with your entire being for the response that will arrive as direct knowing, visual images, physical sensations, or complete understanding that appears in your awareness. The authentic response from your future consciousness will carry unmistakable characteristics, including immediate recognition that feels like remembering something you had forgotten, emotional clarity that resolves current confusion or anxiety, practical specificity that provides clear direction for action, and energetic resonance that creates excitement about implementation, even if the guidance challenges your current comfort zones or preferences. Do not analyze or question the guidance you receive during this initial transmission, because temporal communication operates through quantum channels that are disrupted by logical evaluation, and the wisdom being transmitted requires implementation rather than analysis to demonstrate its accuracy and effectiveness. So write down exactly what you received and commit to implementing it completely within the specified time frame, regardless of whether it makes immediate logical sense. Within 48 hours of implementing your first temporal guidance, Expect to receive confirmation through external circumstances that align to support your action. Opportunities that appear with timing that seems impossibly coordinated, or resolution of problems that had been persistent obstacles. And these confirmations prove that you have established authentic temporal communication rather than experiencing mental projection or psychological compensation. Your future self is now providing additional guidance about developing consistent temporal communication that you can access whenever important decisions arise. And this guidance involves establishing daily connection practices that maintain the quantum channels between your present and evolved consciousness, ensuring that temporal wisdom becomes a reliable resource, rather than an occasional experience that depends on special circumstances or optimal conditions. The daily practice involves spending 5 minutes each morning in the receptive state you just experienced, asking your future consciousness to provide guidance about the optimal approach to the day ahead, focusing particularly on timing for important actions, people to connect with or avoid, and opportunities to watch for. And implementing this guidance consistently creates cumulative acceleration in your development that compounds daily rather than progressing through linear increments. As your temporal communication abilities stabilize and strengthen, your future self will begin providing more complex guidance about major life decisions, optimal timing for significant changes, and coordination with other individuals who share similar evolutionary missions or complementary abilities. And this expanded guidance transforms your entire life into a precisely coordinated expression of your highest potential, rather than random experimentation with growth possibilities. The ultimate purpose of temporal communication is not to eliminate challenges or create an easy life, but to ensure that every challenge you face contributes to your authentic development rather than serving as distraction or delay, and that every opportunity you encounter aligns with your deepest purpose, rather than satisfying temporary desires that divert energy from your primary evolutionary mission. Understanding that your future self has been guiding you toward this moment of conscious temporal connection should create profound gratitude for the wisdom and care being provided by your evolved consciousness. And this gratitude creates stronger quantum channels for ongoing communication while ensuring that temporal guidance is received and applied with appropriate reverence for the intelligence and love being transmitted across time for your benefit. Your life begins changing immediately as you implement guidance from evolved temporal awareness, and these changes will exceed your current expectations while feeling perfectly aligned with who you are becoming rather than who you have been, creating the accelerated development that bypasses decades of linear struggle and positions. You too fulfill your highest purpose during this unprecedented period of cosmic and evolutionary opportunity.